Unspoken Issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. That is right. We are back, and we are still in the 90s. I don't think we're leaving, folks. Just be ready. Sit tight. The 90s are the best decade, and that is what we're here to celebrate, especially Conan versus Rune Saga this evening, which flew under my radar. The man I believe that suggested this one right down there, that's Dean Compton. Dean Compton from the Unspoken Decade. Let me ask you, was this your idea?
Yeah, I was the one who suggested it. I like the Ultraverse a lot. I think we all, like it from what we've seen. This is probably the best Marvel Ultraverse crossover in most ways. I think it's a really cool offbeat story for the 90s. I'm not a big Conan guy, Conan the Barbarian. Like, I like the idea of Conan more than I usually like Conan stories, so this is one of my favorites. And also, you just like to piss all over Barry Windsor Smith. And I was like, I'm going to show you some Barry Windsor Smith that you like, and then maybe you'll get the rest of it. And I think I've accomplished that. I think you did like this. So those are the main reasons, like I said, I can never talk enough Ultraverse. Not a lot of Conan comics in the 90s are going to be on the radar, not, for different reasons that we'll probably get into, but mostly because I like Conan, but because it's all separate, it gets a little repetitive to me. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of classic Conan stories from the 90s. Most of those have already taken place. A lot of them, coincidentally enough, under the pencil talent of Barry Windsor Smith. So, it's just a really cool, quick, thing. And also you get to see, the whole breadth of their conflict from their youth to old. We get to look at King Conan, which is my favorite version of Conan when he's old and a king and he has some gray hair, but goddamn it, can he still swing an axe? So all of those reasons, I think that I think also for both y'all, probably, this is probably something you saw ads for, but didn't read at the time. And I think if you didn't read it, and I didn't read it until 2005 or so, kind of missed out. It's really, really good that it kind of made Conan contemporary. And I think this came out in 95?
95, yeah. That's,
kind of made Conan contemporary in 95 in a way he might not have been for a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, Derry, you're up there. I got a question for you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Conan versus Rune, which one do you know the most about?
I didn't read a lot of Conan comics, but I love the movies, I guess. The first one is great. And there was a wildly inappropriate cartoon that came out.
Really good cartoon, Conan the Adventurer. So much better. Probably my favorite Conan thing ever. It's so much better than it has any right to be. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, I'm fucking back in your play here, bro. I'll co-sign that. Get the loan.
Yeah. I that was my first experience with the character, and then when I got older and I realized that he was a pulp hero and that he crossed over with Lovecraft and that Roy Thomas was a big fan and everything else. I found out something recently that's probably the biggest influence on my life, indirectly because of Conan. So I guess Conan the Barbarian, being a big success for Marvel in the 70s, eventually inspired Dave Sim to create Cerebus the Aardvark as a pastiche of that. Right. And then the idea of an animal pretending to be a warrior is also what inspired Laird and Eastman to make the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In that case, a turtle who was a ninja as opposed to an aardvark who was a barbarian. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that if Roy Thomas hadn't sold Stan Lee on, hey, let's make comics out of these books I liked when I was a little kid, we would not have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
And Conan, in the 60s, the novels had gotten big again for whatever reason. And that's another reason Roy, probably because Lord of the Rings got big around the same time. I think there was just the, Frazetta covers were just, on other pulp style novels that just, really gotten people interested in that. You know what, though? Going back to the old Conan cartoon, can't sleep on that theme, man, where it's like, Conan, the adventurer.
Quest to undo the spell of living stone cast upon his family by driving the evil serpent men back into another dimension and vanquishing their leader, the cruel wizard Rapamon. Conan, adventurer.
that fucking shit slaps. I would have to play that now when I get done. It's so good, so good. The toy line's great too. Honestly, I wish it would have. It deserves a higher spot in like when we talk about like properties that became cartoons. It probably deserves a higher spot, and also especially among the ones that probably shouldn't have. Like there probably shouldn't be a RoboCop cartoon for kids. There probably shouldn't be a Rambo cartoon for kids. Probably shouldn't be a Conan cartoon for kids. But Christy Marks and the other, and I think Buzz Dixon and a few other people really did a great job there.
Derry, you talked a little bit about Conan. Any experience with Rune?
No, I got to be honest. I didn't have the money to buy a lot of Ultraverse books back in the day. So I wasn't aware of the character, but I will say I always loved the design. I thought the vague, gaunt, vampiric looking gargoyle thing with the heavy, they almost look like drawn out infinity gems. They look similar to what we would now call the Infinity Stones. So I always thought he had a great design. So later on, when I got into Windsor Smith and I realized it was him, I almost wasn't surprised because it was like, oh yeah, your art's beautiful, and your design work there is great. So I always thought he was really cool. But I don't think it was until I read these 3 issues that I knew anything about the character. Other than Dean mentioned the other Ultraverse Marvel crossovers, I bought those at the time. I had no idea what was going on. My primary experience with the Ultraverse was from the Ultra Force cartoon.
Ultra Force!
Yeah, and I love that thing. If that thing had aired right after X-Men for 6 seasons, I'd have watched every episode. But yeah, no, very, very limited experience. But I will say this was great because, you can see it's the same auteur. He's crossing over 2 of his properties. He does it in a very particular and purposeful way. And I thought it was great. If it were a couple of years ago, I would say, please put this book back out. I think a lot of people would enjoy it.
Well, they ain't never going to do no Ultraverse books again, apparently. Never going to reprint them. Never
I
going to do nothing.
I know. Yeah.
Wouldn't even let the Overstreet Guide to Lost Universes do an Ultraverse cover. They got to do a new universe one, but wouldn't even allow them.
Wow.
So...
Don't let people know about it, for crying out loud.
Right. Otherwise, these 1,000 fans might spend some money. And I literally mean the 1,000 fans that are clamoring for a fucking comeback of the solution and freaks. So I love the Ultraverse though. I think Rune's look is actually like slightly ahead of its time. It's really funny. You look at him, and if like you look at him when he's like at his full power, like we get to see him a couple times, there's a very like Marilyn Manson kind of like that glam shock rock that would become big in the later 90s kind of feel to him. So I thought that was pretty good about him. Rune is essentially a cosmic space vampire who is not a good guy, and he becomes one of the biggest bad guys in the Ultraverse. I remember he discovers those like gem things that you see. I forget what they're called, but that's a lot of his power comes from that, when he discovered them. And then later on, he'll go after like the Infinity Gems and stuff. Like he'll wrest the gems from the Infinity Watch and that kind of thing. He's a very power hungry guy because he literally is hungry. And if he eats guys with like superpowers, which he likes to do, really satiates his hunger more. I think he had a lot of in his book. He has a lot of go-ins with like Aladdin. It's kind of a confusing but good book. I need to get another read on it. Chris Ulm also co-created Rune. It's important to note that he deserves some credit. They're the editor-in-chief of Malibu Comics and the Ultraverse. And so Rune's just, one of those big baddies who just looks good, who can just, kind of throw down with just about anybody. Later on, like they'll do retcon, like he tries to go after Prime and like all these guys to like eat them. And, I don't think he ever gets there, but arguably one of the still most recognizable characters from the Ultraverse. He actually got a Hero Clicks like 5 years ago.
Yeah,
like,
I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
So, it's weird that they would like allow that.
5 years ago, really?
So around there, I want to say. And the only other mention of the Ultraverse is like they've assigned it a world number, I believe. And like on a cover of one of the early Spider-Verse books, like Spider Prime's head is in like a collection of heads, but it's like kind of blurred out. But if you know it's Spider Prime, you know it's Spider Prime.
Why are they taking these steps to like just... I mean, at least they got a brief, tiny mention, but like, let's bury him under this so people really can't tell for sure.
again, I mean, we talked about this when we did the Strangers hard case crossover, but there's lots of reasons why they're not going to do it. Some of them center around, Scott Mitchell Rosenberg apparently would get a position on one of the movies, like a producer credit, if like they decide to make a movie out of hard case or whatever. Even bigger at this point in time, it's like nobody's published a fucking Ultraverse comic since like what, 1997 is like the last one. Future Shock, it's 96 or 97, I think 97. It's like 25 years ago. Again, there's 1,000 people that would go buy it in a heartbeat, and I think the three of us would be among those 1,000 people, but like it's not what's going to happen. So I think that's an even bigger impediment at this point. Like, how are you going to dedicate the money to getting this stuff ready to reprint? Or like, is there, outside of these 1,000 people, is there a market for a brand new goddamn mantra story? I mean, it's maybe not, but why? I mean, but one of the things I was going to bring up with Rune too that y'all might remember is the promotional campaign. If you were reading like Hero Illustrated or Wizard at the time, they were really pumping Rune hard. Barry Windsor Smith, you would have like little like Rune is coming, like that kind of thing. It was like kind of the second wave, because Ultraverse always pumped itself hard early on.
The thing I like most about Rune, and I've always liked this about him in concept, is I like watching the villain be the protagonist. Like you mentioned that he's a big bad, he's incredibly dangerous, he's incredibly powerful. I think that's great. I'm always a huge fan of that. So the fact that that was how the character was positioned from the very beginning, and he doesn't really seem to have like an anti-hero arc or something like that, I think that's great. I think you could tell a lot of stories with someone who's just, this cross between Thanos, Galactus, Dracula, I want more power for the sake of it, and when I get it, I'm going to use it to get even more. It's a good driver in stories that usually have to have a fight halfway through. So I do like that. I think that's very versatile, and I think most of the characters that we follow don't get to pull that off. So again, I would love if he showed up in the Marvel Universe today.
Well, to kind of give a little bit of a background on our characters, maybe repeating some things these guys have already said. Let's talk about Conan the Barbarian real quick. Conan, created by Robert E. Howard in 1932 for a series of fantasy stories published in Weird Tales magazine. Conan was born in the Hyborian Age, became a warrior by the age of 15, and has since wandered the world fighting all sorts of mythical villains, from monsters to wizards. Not just a simple muscle-bound barbarian, though. He is pretty smart. He's got a good head on him. He's a good tactician. His first official comic appearance was in Marvel Comics, Conan the Barbarian #1, I believe, in 1970. Dark Horse took over the license in 2003. Marvel took the license back in 2018, getting him mixed up with other Marvel mainstays in the Savage Avengers. I don't know if you read any of that, Dean.
He read The Punisher.
That's right, buddy. In 2022, Titan Publishing had acquired the rights and is just about to drop their own Conan comics this year. So there you go. There's a little bit of background on Conan. Rune, created by Chris Ulm and Barry Windsor Smith, first appeared in Sludge #1 from October of 1993. Rune, just like we said, human-like alien vampire, and has these star stones, is what it was called. The star
stones. That's what they're fucking called. Yeah, I remember now.
Magical artifacts which made him virtually immortal, but cursed him with a monstrous form and a vampiric thirst for blood. Ages ago, he found himself stranded on Earth, been both worshipped as a god and reveled as a demon throughout history. Thank you, Hey Kids Comics fandom.wiki.
You win some, you lose some, right?
So
worship as a god, reviled as a demon. It's like when Bret Hart in 1997 was a hero in Canada, but hated in the United States. It really just depends on who's looking through the lens, right?
What a time to be watching wrestling. Right
yeah,
there.
You know what, though? Let's be honest. Rune doesn't do nearly as good as a sharpshooter as Bret the Hitman. Excellence of fucking execution.
That's right. All right, Dean, I want you to shine a little bit of light here real quick. I know we've already talked a little bit about Malibu, Ultraverse, and Marvel. Marvel came in and took away our Ultraverse, absorbed it.
I mean, that's not really what happened.
Okay. That's why you're here. I want to hear.
Again, I talked to a lot of the Ultraverse guys, the Malibu guys, great people. If you're not in the Ultraverse group and you want to talk to Tom Mason or Dave Ulbrich, really nice, very open. But like basically, DC was going to buy Malibu Comics, and if they did, they'd have been the number one publisher at the time. Terry Stewart, the president of Marvel Comics at the time, did not want that to happen because Marvel was a publicly traded company. That would cause the stock to go down just because it'd be bad news, and his whole goal, when you're a publicly traded company and you're the president, your job is to make sure that the shareholders continue to make money. So Marvel swooped in, not at the 11th hour, but like at 11:56 and bought Malibu instead of DC. And then they would incorporate various elements of the Marvel universe into the Ultraverse and back and forth. God Wheel, which does involve Rune, is one of the first instances where this happens, where like Thor and Loki wind up in the Ultraverse. And I think that's how Rune like gets to the Marvel universe, I believe. I think he like jumps through the portal after Thor. But yeah, as time went on, the market was shrinking. Malibu had to sell. They weren't, they were losing money. They were hemorrhaging money every month. And so if they didn't sell, there wouldn't be any Ultraverse comics. There wouldn't be any Malibu, to speak of. So these guys, they sold, did what they had to do. Marvel continued to publish a lot of it. It didn't really work. They rebooted it with what was called Black September.
Black September.
And they rebooted the titles, brought back like Prime, Ultra Force, Mantra, and a couple others they can't remember, and it just didn't work. You know what I mean? Like there's this weird idea, and you see this still in the Ultraverse group and other places, that Marvel bought the Ultraverse and bought Malibu just to crush it. That couldn't be further from the truth. And that's not from, you don't take my word for it. Take like Tom Mason's. He's like, Marvel wanted the Ultraverse to succeed. They wanted to sell fucking comic books. That's why they bought it, because because they were worried that they would be number 2 instead of number 1 because they sold that many comics. But it was a dwindling era for sales. The speculator boom was, way over, and people still had wildly inaccurate, too large estimates about how many people were actually reading comic books in America. And Marvel, I think, if we're saying, did Marvel put every ounce of effort they possibly could into making sure the Ultraverse succeeded? Probably not. Did they do a better than adequate job, like a really good job trying to make sure it worked? Absolutely. There's no reason not to believe that. They bought a lot of fucking ad space in Wizard and Hero. The Black September event, they publicized it big. They crossed it over with the X-Men every fucking chance they got, and put the Juggernaut in the Exiles. We'll have, we'll do the Phoenix Resurrection and shit,
Right.
So there's no reason to believe that. It was a product of its time, and that time came to an end, sadly. Well, I don't know if the market would ever support people trying to start 7 superhero universes again. It was a unique period of time, and again, maybe we got the Rune Hero clicks. Maybe in a couple of years you'll get like a Strangers direct sales figures line. I don't fucking know. Maybe something will happen, but that's basically the story. Is Marvel bought Malibu, thought it would help them sell a bunch of comics. It didn't. They had to shut it down. One of the things I like to draw a parallel to here, too, is at the same time, people are like, oh, they killed the Ultraverse on purpose. They didn't care. At the same time, if you look at the 2099 imprint, which Marvel started, it's going through a very similar evolution. They're cutting titles back. It's going to eventually be compressed into like one book, and then it's going to kind of just stop because it wasn't selling. And I think that like people, if they were trying to kill the Ultraverse, why did they do the same thing to 2099? Because that's theirs. Because the argument is they didn't care about the Ultraverse, they didn't start it. But if you look at these parallels, it's very similar. They tried what they could with both, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. I mean, not much was working in 1997 for Marvel.
Right. There's
And the industry in general, it just wasn't a great time.
Exactly. Well, let's go ahead and we'll talk about this Marvel property hanging out with the Malibu property, and that's Conan versus Rune. So we're going to start out. This is a trilogy of books. It takes place in 3 books. One very small story at the end of Conan number 4, and then we have the very dedicated Conan versus Rune number 1. And then we kind of wrap things up in Conan the Savage #4 with a tale from Conan's later years. So I'm going to go ahead. We'll get into the synopsis for our first one, and we can talk a little bit about it. It's not, like I said, not very long, not much here. Conan #4, Wicked Conjuring. This was on the shelves September of 1995, cover dated November of 95, written by Larry Hama. People might recognize that name. Penciled by Barry Crane, inked by Carlos Garzon, and lettered by Dan Crespi, colored by Sarah Mussoff. After finding himself in a new reality, the vampiric
As one does.
Yeah, it happened. You wake up one day, next thing you know. After finding himself in a new reality, the vampiric Rune has made a home in the state of Turon during the Hyborian Age, and he is not happy. However, he aims to keep himself and his soul shards, starstones, fed with humans. But since he is in a weakened state, he worries if someone would be strong enough to oppose him. Using the blood of some of his recent victims, Rune conjures a vision to show anyone strong enough that could pose a threat. As the image solidifies, Rune sees a barbarian riding on a horse. The great Conan is heading toward Turon, and Rune looks to be ready. There you go. That's it. There's our, what was that, like 5 pages maybe?
Something like that.
Pretty small story. I will say, just Barry Crane on arts here, not bad. I mean, I was actually...
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I put down here, it reminded me of a little of Silvestri. That just might be because we talked Cyberforce a while back. It did look good.
You'll never miss a chance to mention Cyberforce.
No, I won't.
You're the one. You're the one. You're always like, oh man, this would have been, when we're going to see Rune Impact. When does Velocity meet the Ultra Force?
So yeah, I mean, this is simple enough. This kind of gets you ready. I imagine if you're a reader of Conan at this time, I mean, it's only issue #4, but you know, I'm wondering what the reaction was when they're sitting there in the 90s and they're like flipping through the book and they're like, what in the world? Oh, wait a second, Rune. Because I don't know if they were hyping this story at all. I'm sure that you've probably seen a few ads. I don't know if people were expecting this to happen at the end.
They were definitely hyping it. I remember the ads. You're right. This is Conan #4, but Conan had like a long running series prior. And for whatever reason, Marvel canceled it, and they canceled Savage Sword of Conan and started them over with new numbers, presumably to try and make some traction in the direct market. But Conan historically, up until that point, had never been a big direct market seller. It is a mainstream property. You know, you got to think about the 80s. The movies came out. People would buy this like on a whim at like the gas station or whatever. And I think it was Larry Hama who once said like the demographic for the magazines, pre the black and white magazines, Savage Sword of Conan and Conan the Savage, which has kind of inherited that mantle, were like big biker guys with tattoos. That's who they bought them from like, 7-Elevens and stuff. And that's, they didn't give a shit about anything that was happening in the Marvel Universe. They liked this guy who fucking cut people's heads off and stuff. So it's interesting that they like even started this over to start this over. Like, I don't know who this is for, because nobody who was buying Marvel Universe comics who wasn't already buying Conan cared, and all it could have possibly done was confuse the bikers.
How long did the magazine format? I could probably look this up, but I mean, the magazine format Conan ran for a long time, right? I mean, it ran for a good bit, didn't it? Like, I think it was in like the 120s. Because
it was in the 200s. Savage Sword of Conan was in the 200s when it got canceled. I don't know how long Conan the Savage goes, but it's like, also a magazine, I believe.
Okay. All right. Well,
I have a question because I couldn't figure this out on my own, and there may not be an answer, but if anyone knows it, it's you. Is Rune from Conan's universe?
No, he's from the Ultraverse.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I think when I can't say for sure, but when he like jumps through I don't know how he wound up back in this spot, but like that's where he was. And also Conan, for a long time, Marvel just used Conan's time as like theirs. And like you have
Oh
guys
yeah, that's true.
Kulan Gath.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
he's like a Conan and X-Men villain, and like Shuma Garath is fought like Conan and Doctor Strange. So like for a long time that was just their past, because I don't think they ever envisioned that they'd give up the license. And I'm sure in like 1977, you go back and look at like Marvel promotional shit from like the 70s, the two things that will always stand out to you, a lot of guys you see Spider-Man, Captain America, Fantastic Four, what the fuck ever, but on this shit you will always see like Conan and Dracula. They'll always, and they will stand out. You're like, wow, they're a big fucking deal, you know, in a way that they would not be by the time Conan Rune hits. But I think this just has something to do with him going through that portal and winding up in this time, or it could just be another one of his adventures that like we're just now hearing about, you know, because he's existed for like, you know, I don't know, 75,000 years, you know, approximately half the age of Keith Richards.
So the time frame on Marvel purchasing Malibu, November 3rd of 94 is what I had listed here. This comic comes out a year later. So at the time, I assume what's going on in 95, they're probably trying to bring the Ultraverse and marry it with the Marvel universe.
Yeah, they want it to be kind of, you know, separate but connected, you know, like they'll put the Black Knight in Ultra Force. It doesn't become one universe, you know, but like they definitely, you know about it and stuff like that.
Okay.
It's not like the DC Marvel crossover Earth where like Spider-Man met Superman and Punisher met Batman.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer that, Derry?
No, it does. I completely forgot that there was a long stretch of time where Conan, and recently, they did this recently too when they had the license, where Conan was just in the Marvel universe a couple 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, whatever it's supposed to be. So yeah, I forgot about that. But yeah, no, that does make sense, because at that point they were crisscrossing back and forth, and he's clearly shown to be some sort of like cosmic eldritch terror. So no, that does make sense.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he got them fangs.
Yes, he does. Well, what do you think of this there, Dean? This is, you know, it's perfect intro, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was honestly designed for, like, the people who weren't catching the ads. If you were reading Conan, I think it's just like, hey, we got this other thing coming out. You might ought to check it out.
I'd have been upset, though. And granted, I don't know what the readers of Conan were like back then. Maybe they expected this. But, I mean, the cover of this is Rune versus Conan.
Yeah. It's a very, I agree with you. It's a fucking bait and switch. Like, at no point do they fight in this comic book.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's barely even a setup to a fight.
Yeah, it's like,
I mean, it's a good setup for the story, but it's not a setup for a fight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you know, but like, yeah, there was definitely a bait and switch. But I think the people who are reading Conan, they were going to read Conan no matter what.
Right.
I would have been upset if I was an Ultraverse person who picked this up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, who's like, this is on the cover. Like, if you were getting Conan, you know, whatever. But if you got this because it promised you, you know, this, then you kind of got ripped off, because Rune just walks around doing his best David Bowie impression, walking around, being skinny, saying cryptic shit. And then, like, you know, then he does, like, the ritual, and he's like, oh, how can this barbarian hurt me? With a lot of ways. With a bone, among others.
Get ready, yeah.
I actually read the entire issue, and I can tell you, I love Larry Hama, because I never know what absolute complete nonsense he's going to have his characters say. Like, his dialogue for me, and I'm a huge Larry Hama fan. I'm not saying he can't write. I think he writes very well, but he writes in a way that is particular to himself. And if you were to read this dialogue out loud, it sounds like you're doing Shakespeare in the Park. It's just so overwritten, and I love it, because he takes every character super seriously, whether they're, you know, Snake Eyes or Conan on the horse. Yeah, the 5-page setup was a little weird, because I agree with Dean. If I had been reading this all along, I'd be like, wait, what's going on? What is this? You know, you teased the tease. You didn't give me anything to go with. And it's funny too, because once you get to the actual Rune versus Conan book, it's pretty self-contained. Like, the story that comes.
Yeah, you didn't need this for any reason. That's the only reason this could be in here, is in case like 5 people reading Conan had not heard that Rune Conan was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you are picking up the Conan monthly book and they want to direct you towards this fancy, probably very expensive to make, one shot, it's like, yeah, these 5 pages are a lead into that. Like, hey, note from the editor, make sure you go get this thing. It might not be available where you buy your local Conan book. So yeah, I agree. I think it's set up. It's not bad as a setup. I mean, I've seen
it's perfectly good. I think it does a good job showing you who Rune is. If you, like you said, if you just read the crossover, you would be confused.
Yeah, it's a good self-contained one shot. Again, I really wish that had been reprinted when Marvel had the license recently. I mean, God, they were putting Conan in like Avengers books and all this other nonsense. It's like, it's like, put that out, please.
Oh, I just looked up Barry Crane to kind of see what he did on Mike's Amazing World of Comics. He's a penciler. That's pretty much what he's been doing. But what I found interesting, just real quick, is that I'm going to be discussing, this won a poll on the Source Material Comics Twitter. I'm going to be discussing the Earthworm Jim series at some point in the future, written by Dan Slott and art by Barry Crane. So interesting little tidbit there.
Ah, yes, Dan Slott's magnum opus.
I was gonna say it might be the best thing he ever wrote. So
I don't know, man. Like that Ren and Stimpy was pretty good, right?
Oh yeah, that's fair.
He was good on Ren and Stimpy.
He was good on Ren and Stimpy.
And I was gonna say that's got to be why they tagged him for the Earthworm Jim stuff, because it's just goofiness on top of goofiness too.
Do you guys remember that had a cartoon? Right? Am I making that up?
Nope, you're not making that up. I
know it more as a video game than anything else.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I do think it had a cartoon.
Yeah, I did a poll on it, and then like a week later, the Angry Video Game Nerd did a focus on all the games. And I was like, well, and that's where you mentioned the cartoon. So yeah, that's where I learned about
it's the Secret Galaxy, Toy Galaxy people too, because they did G.I. Joe Extreme.
Bastards.
We're the ECW of these podcasts.
Oh, yes.
They're picking our good shit to get it to don't stream.
You got it.
But it's happening.
All right, it's time
Gary's
for the main
Paul Heyman because he's from New York.
I don't know if Derry gets that. Do you know who Paul Heyman is, Derry?
Oh, no, not even. I barely know what ECW is. I know a lot about useless things, but when you guys start talking about wrestling, I am so lost so quickly.
That's not true. Bret Hart is your favorite wrestler.
That is true. I do not know why, but I very much like Bret Hart. I have no idea why.
Because he's fucking great.
There you go. There you go.
Excellence of execution.
Yeah.
Best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Right. Unlike Cyberforce.
I don't know why we got to get shots in here, but all right, whatever.
Man.
Whatever.
I
can't wait to edit it out. Or actually, I want to edit it so that you said that they are the greatest.
Right. You know, like Cyberforce.
The main event, Conan versus Rune *1, on the shelves, October 5th, 1995. Writer-artist Barry Windsor Smith, ladies and gentlemen. Ink assist by Alex Bialy, lettered by John Costar, and colorist Eric Hope. Conan rides toward a city in Tehran and discovers a desolate town and intends to ride on if it weren't for the faint glint of a red gem inside a large building. Looking to snatch it, Conan gets off his horse and walks inside, but soon the large doors slam behind him. Realizing he is trapped, while he hears his horse being slaughtered outside, he treads further into the building, only to find masses of the townsfolk in pieces. One man, barely alive, tells Conan the story of their murderer and how they found him clinging to life in the desert, took him in, and healed him. After 100 days, the man recovered and made a life for himself in Tehran until one day a homicidal instinct took over and he began to brutally kill those around him. This man called himself Rune. As the injured man dies, he tells Conan to continue on and that he will find a way out. Soldiering forth, Conan enters a courtyard where hundreds have lain torn apart. Enraged, Conan screams for Rune to face him, and rushing out from the dark, Rune attacks. As the two grapple and exchange words, a savage fight begins. The advantage shifts back and forth till finally Conan takes control and believes he has Rune beaten to death. Conan sees the gems around Rune's neck and grabs them. However, once he touches them, he is beset by visions of the galaxies that Rune has fed upon in many different forms, feeling his own body lost to the void. Screaming, Conan awakens in the carnage of the courtyard, surprised that he is still alive, with Rune nowhere in sight. So there you go. That is a very big nutshell. Let me tell you, usually try to verbalize or write out, fight scenes because it's tough. And there's a lot of fight scenes in this, which is great. I love that. So what I'm giving you here is just a snippet of what happens. You need to find this book and watch the fight go down. That is for sure, because it does get good.
I enjoyed the hell out of this issue. I really did. So many crossovers are so ridiculous. I don't even know if this counts as a crossover because the guy in question had such a important role in developing both of them as comic book characters. But this is just a beautiful, great fight scene. This is just pure, absolute brutality. It's like, you're going to take two characters who are the star of their own books and put them in a room and say, what actually is going to happen if they both act the way they would normally in their own books. It's like a Tarantino film, and it's just brutal, but it's great, and it's honest too. Like you really get the feeling like Conan. I know he becomes king. I know he goes on. I know he's got all these other stories, but I don't know. He might not make it out of this. They really do a great job at setting Rune up as a threat. He's not just the next baddie. He's not just the guy that Conan deals with. Like, the entire world is like, if you fail, if you don't beat this guy for whatever reason, he's going to destroy everything. So they raise the stakes, but still Smith understands Conan, because what does he do? He has Conan throw the knife away, and he has Conan immediately act like the young guy who's still learning his stuff. And I just thought it was so rewarding to see someone like Winsor Smith, who I really, really like, both for Weapon X, of course, but literally everything else he's done that I can get my hands on. Or the original Archer and Armstrong, of what I've read of it, I absolutely love it. I really enjoyed this issue. The one thing I will say is I'm still not 100% sure how he actually does beat him, because he punches him, and that's like really, really great. But at the end of the day, it's like, isn't this guy a god? Like, I was a little surprised that he was able to do that. But I thought the scene where he grabs the Star Stone and kind of releases the source of all Rune's power was great, because Conan's a very like meat and potatoes character, especially at this stage in his career, and I love that Rune sees himself as this highfalutin god come to feast among the peasants, and Conan's like, I'm not scared of you, I'm gonna beat you or I'm gonna die. One of those two things is gonna happen, and he beats him just because the alternative wasn't gonna happen that day.
I mean, the brutality of this comic is it's so over the top. The story that the townsperson is telling Conan about how, some lady just wanted to touch his lips, and he reaches down and I was like, oh, he's going to bite her throat. No, he rips her head off with his mouth. Like, it's just crazy. Like, I mean, it says that she had been one of those who had nursed him so devotedly, who had given him so much of herself to save the life of the very incarnation of death. He ripped her head from her shoulders and devoured it whole. Now, I was like, okay, I knew Rune was a bad guy, but man, like, this dude is like taking body parts off, inhaling people. That was pretty crazy. I'm going to go ahead. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Okay. Barry Windsor Smith.
I was about to ask you, Mr. Mr. spent 10 seconds in the microwave.
I'm telling you.
I'm telling you. Yeah, listen up, Jesse. We were right. It's cool. It's cool.
This was good. This was very good.
This was good.
Yes, it was.
You should also look at the Machine Man miniseries from the 80s, because it's fucking wild.
Oh, yeah?
Everyone should.
Okay. I'll remember that. The attention to, some of the detail that he puts in, especially like the carnage that happened down in the courtroom and the masses of flies all over the place.
Yeah.
And when Conan wakes up after the vision or whatever, and he's just covered in gore. And props to the colorist too. Blood looks like blood to me here. I'm not rubbing the blood, but it's
blood strike nowhere to be found. Hanging out wherever Cyberforce is in a crossover called Extremely Cyber.
It looked the part. It looked gory. This is probably my favorite BWS work that I've looked at.
The floors look like a Resident Evil game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, dude.
I mean that in a good way.
Yeah. Derry kind of already touched on it. We don't really know how he beat Rune. I didn't understand how Conan was still alive. Like, if Conan
because
passes,
he's Conan. That's
Okay.
kind of what they say.
Yeah.
Like, as he's like going through all this, like he keeps himself together. It's somewhat. I don't know if you've ever read like Thanos Quest, but he has to do a similar thing when he's dealing with like the reality gem. But like, basically as he went through all this horror, he kept his sense of self together. I don't know how he beat Rune either. I personally assumed that like Rune got his ass kicked real good and was dying, but he thought because of like the explosion that Conan was dead, so he just left. That he was able to heal himself later, and he's like, I gotta get out of here. Put Conan's fucking horses, fucking set it on fire, put it on a sword, and left.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he also did that unsolved mysteries bullshit with the put the blood, like the symbols that are supposed to mean something. They didn't mean anything to me. They didn't mean anything to Conan either, but I can read and he can't. So
aren't what they mean on the inside cover?
Right. Separation, warrior, journey, disruption. I still don't know how that ties in.
For some,
I don't know.
I only skimmed that. So, okay. Well, thanks, guy.
It makes it no clearer. I have no idea.
Right. Let's see. Okay, great.
Like Rune's just like, hey, I'm gonna scrawl some stuff up here, and okay.
Well, this whole issue had the feeling of part one of more, because they even keep saying like, if he gets out, the whole world's gonna be punished. Like the third part that we read tonight has a different creative team. I don't know if Windsor Smith had anything to do with it, and it kind of follows up thematically to the earlier one. But the way the one shot ends, you really do think like Rune's gonna reconstitute himself, and that's it. He's coming for you. This whole thing was prelude. Though, again, maybe because he got the stone and he got all the souls he had taken up until that point, there just wasn't enough of him. And by the time he reconstitutes, it's 50 years later or whatever. So
that's how I understand.
Yeah, okay.
One of the things I think that a lot of people, especially superhero fans, forget when they read Conan is that Conan's not necessarily a hero. Like, he's a thief and a mercenary and a pirate. At different times later, he'll be king. He's a murderer. Like, at the beginning when he's writing, he's like, oh, man, I just been eating lizards for days. Man, I see this Bedouin tribe. He's like, maybe they'll have some flatbread or some of that great broth. And he's like, if they won't give it, he gets his sword ready. He's like, if they won't give it to me, though, maybe I'll have to take it. Like without like really thinking about it. Although I do think they probably would have just given it to him. Conan also, like, it's not like he doesn't have like a sense of honor and duty. Like, he doesn't just walk up to people and he's like, oh man, you've got some banana berry split bubble yum, just stab him and just give them up the yum. Like, he doesn't do that or anything.
He should. I would read that.
I just want the gum, man. They don't make that shit no more. It's delicious. He's a character that, like, when you play Dungeons and Dragons, like, people, there's an alignment and people always want like examples, and he's one of the best examples of a chaotic neutral alignment. Whatever, he values his freedom above like everything else. Sometimes that means he's betrayed people, sometimes that means he's been very loyal. It just depends.
Where do you guys think Samaria is supposed to be? Because I read once where it's supposed to be, and I'm always like, nah, I don't buy that. Where do you guys think Samaria is supposed to be?
Like, I have no clue. The only thing Samaria, I picture deserts for some reason. I don't know if you guys do. And it's been forever since I've watched the movie, but like, that's what I'm going to say around Egypt. So
okay,
there you go.
I always pictured like East Turkey down to Lebanon, all the way to like the Iraq-Iran border, like around the Persian Gulf.
It's Scotland.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm no Conan scholar. I was trying to figure out how the Conan mythology and the Lovecraft mythology cross over, and it's basically because they were in the same, like, they had the same editor or something. So like one of them needed a god character, and the other one was like, oh, I created a snake, take mine or whatever. And they were like, oh, great, cool. So, they kind of have a crossover. And I read something once that like Conan is always described as being what at the time in the 20s when the original stories were coming out, an ancient like Celtic warrior was. So that's where they were coming from. But I'm with you guys. Before I had read that, I just assumed he came from somewhere in the area you guys are describing. But I read that once and I just thought like wow, we have a totally different image of what Howard, different from what Howard did.
Well, he was wrong. He got that one wrong. I know he doesn't spend all his time in Samaria, though. I guess, so maybe some of the shit we're seeing, you could...
he was a slave, and he got taken from his home. That's kind of his, that's his origin story. That's his, protects a world that hates and fears them. But to Dean's earlier point, I do love the idea that so many Conan stories are, this guy could very easily be the antagonist. And are you going to root for him? Are you going to see him through to the end of his adventure? Because going back to what we were saying earlier about him getting a kids cartoon, he's presented as a noble savage. He's not the smartest guy in the room, but he's going to try to do the right thing. He's going to live by his code. It's almost like a cartoonish Klingon way of looking at things. But in the original stories, it's much more gray. The world he lives in, he's described as a barbarian, right? Well, what do we in the West think of a barbarian? We think of someone that brought down civilization, brought down Rome. It's not a compliment to call someone a barbarian. And that's basically what Conan is. Can he become civilized? Can he survive in this waste? And it's well, yeah, he can, but he's going to have to do some pretty bad things to make it through. I do love, as Dean mentioned earlier too, that he actually becomes king because he's so good at surviving in this world that eats up most of the people who are in it, that eventually they're like, yeah, all right, you're doing something right. Lead the rest of us.
Right. Well, it's such an interesting thing, from slave to king, and you see this linear, path of him. And even as king, he's still quite the badass. As far as the book goes, if you're a Barry Windsor Smith fan, you should get it. If you're a Rune fan, you should get it. If you're a Conan fan, you should get it. If you like gore, you should get it. If you like, some good fight scenes, you should get it. Conan stabs the guy with the bone. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, man.
Awesome. It's very, very straightforward. There's not, other than how did Conan live through the grabbing the Star Stones, there's not a whole lot of subtlety. In fact, arguably the creepiest, scariest part is when his horse gets killed off panel.
Yeah.
His fucking, he's all these monstrous bone creaking. This poor horse.
That's some good
it felt so
writing.
bad. This horse had been riding through the desert. Conan's been eating lizard skins. What the fuck has he been giving this fucking horse? This poor guy, and now he's Rune fucking decapitates him to make a flaming sword. Also, I think it's we point out that Conan, like you said, not the best guy, but usually has the inclination to do something the right thing. Because when he meets the dying man, he doesn't realize he's dying. At first, he's like, "No, we'll get out of here. Come on, I'll help you." He's like, "Well, actually, I've been eaten. I don't have any legs."
Yeah.
And then Conan gives him the mercy killing he asked for. Which is nice. But Conan was perfectly willing to help this guy out. Much risk to him. And I think because Conan, despite not necessarily being good, does believe in the golden rule. If Conan was laying there, he would want this guy to help him too.
Yeah.
So let's do it. But now if this guy starts to fuck around, this guy's gonna find out. But yeah, from start to finish, it's beautifully rendered, it's beautifully written. Barry Windsor Smith probably deserves more credit as a writer than he gets, but this is very well done.
It's done.
Much like the Archer and Armstrong stuff, very well done. You could not go wrong. If you don't want to read the other two parts, you really just have to read this too. So there's not a whole lot for you to track down. this was satisfyingly grisly, I guess would be the best way to put it.
I like it. I like it.
They would never reprint this, but if they do, I want that on the back. I want that as one of the pull codes. Satisfying Grizzly. The Unspoken Decade. Let's get Simon Bisley to do a pinup too, just to make it all come together.
Please do.
Yeah.
Rune with a big dick on his arm.
All right. Let's wrap things up here with Conan the Savage #4. This was on sale at the same time, same day, at least according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, October 5th, 1995.
Looky there, you get all in one shop. You're like, oh, I like this.
Right.
Oh, this has Rune in it too. I better get it too. I will say this one though, not the bait and switch. Like you do get a Conan for,
Yes, you do.
probably in quotes, but there's at least a confrontation.
So the title of this story is The Wind from the Stars, written by Chuck Dixon, art by Enrique Alcantena, lettered by Vicky Williams. Some time has passed since our last story, and Conan is now a ruler of the Aquilonian Empire and is currently leading its soldiers on a campaign tracking down the Brotherhood of the Spider, a cult of assassins that failed in killing Conan. As they enter the city, a deadly ritual is taking place where the Brotherhood is ushering in an entity called Baethra. Outside, the smell of blood and power has drawn Rune to the city as well, and he looks to feed. As Conan fights his way to the site of the ritual, he arrives just in time to see the monstrous entity Baethra appear. Trying to discern a way to attack, Conan watches as Rune appears and attacks Baethra. Baethra then consumes Rune, just one big bite, and looks to finish off Conan when Baethra begins to howl and disintegrate. Conan is astonished to see Rune standing in the center of what once was Baethra, now at his full power. Rune basks in the glorious feeling that has returned to him, not realizing Conan is behind him, who swiftly cuts Rune's head right off. Rune is still conscious and watches in horror as Conan takes his axe and follows suit with the rest of his limbs. Satisfied Rune is dead, Conan leaves with his soldiers, but in the darkness where pieces of Rune lay, something shifts as the eyes open on Rune's decapitated head. So there you go. That is Conan the Savage, number 4. I'll start out this one.
Good.
So my first note was, what the hell is on Conan's hand on the cover? The good thing is we've had this discussion before this podcast tonight, and I want you to explain what in the world I was missing here, Dean.
Well, I don't think it's quite a cestus, but like it's cestus-ish. He's got a dagger thing attached to his wrist. His hand is under it. He's doing his best Wolverine impression on the cover. He'll do his best Jason Voorhees impression inside. So he's just just Conan Knight at the Improv. I'm doing this and everything. But yeah, it's just it's a very sharp it almost looks like a spade kind of that's on his hand, and him and Rune are going at it. Rune, who looks very Spider-esque on the cover, despite never really looking Spider-esque anywhere else. They're fighting on the cover, but that's what that is. I don't know the term for it, but it's cestus-like.
Okay, that's good enough. Yeah, when I first saw the cover, I thought his hand was gone and completely replaced with a large arrowhead.
That's fine. Honestly, listen. If somebody told you that, at one point in the Conan saga, he loses his hand and he gets replaced by a sharp fucking arrowhead, I'd buy it.
Completely believable. I honestly thought that that's what was going on here. I thought that
600 Conan comics. I'm not going to read them all to find out if some asshole's lying to me about this. That sounds plausible. If you were like, oh yeah, at one point Conan finds out he's a mutant and he has a jet engine that comes out of his ass so that he can fly over everybody, I'm like, that doesn't fucking happen. Fuck you. But he gets his arm replaced with an arrowhead. Sure, that sounds plausible.
Hey, yeah, I believe it. I believe every word of it. What we get here is the only way that this battle could go down. With Rune in his full power anyway. Because Rune gets his full power back. And right there, we watched him in the previous issue go up against Rune. And Rune, I don't know. I don't think he's at his full power at that point. He's definitely pretty powerful. But here, he just absorbed a large entity, a very powerful entity. And yeah, the only way
some sort of extra dimensional demon.
Yeah. The only way that Conan could do this is take him by surprise. And that's great. I love it. I love that that's the way this went down.
One of the things I really like about it is how it moves forward. Think about the Rune Conan book itself, where Conan is like, I don't need my sword. I know he's baiting me, but I don't give a shit. And this one, he's like, I will sneak up on him with an axe while he is not looking. I will cut his fucking head off.
Yeah.
Because he won't be expecting it. Nobody expected the guy at Madison Square Garden to pull out the knife. At the Carnage concert, Conan was ready to go. This guy was ready to go too. You got to be ready. I respect Conan for that.
There does.
So no, I really like that shows him age, because like King Conan is like my favorite Conan, because like they say like heavy is the head that wears the crown, and it's usually bullshit. But like when you read Conan, he's like people will try and bait him. And he's like, I'm not going to war with your country. And they're like, what? He's like, listen, if it was me and you, I'd rip your fucking head off right now. If it was me and my family and you were saying this, I'd rip your fucking head off right now. But I have to look out for this whole kingdom. That will cost a lot of people. He's like, I'm not going to send a bunch of sons, away for their mothers to cry over their bodies just because, of this bullshit that you're pulling right now. Like he actually becomes a solid statesman. I mean, and he genuinely has his people's like best concerns at heart. Again, because then he'll tell you, he'll be like, the savageness that he deals with as a king, like makes him long for the days when he was like a thief with no money.
Yeah.
Because he's like, this is like a lot worse than I ever had to deal with, beating, the pirates of, Tishbele or what the fuck ever, I mean, whoever, the dark god of Chrysamo. So I really liked it. I liked every part of it. I like where like when he's leaving, they're like, "Oh man, let's sing some songs." He's like, "Shut the fuck up. I don't ever want to talk.
Well, I don't want to talk about this
again because it's like go get some. There's a horrific memory." And the part where Rune's like, "Tell me your name so I can howl into the wind." He's like, "Conan." And there'll be lots of people there to howl it back. I've killed lots of people, Rune, not just you. Don't be bad. Getting killed by Conan doesn't make you a bad fighter or a bad like wizard or whatever. It just makes you like everybody else. No big deal.
It does support how smart Conan is as well, the way that it was quickly over, because I mean, he knew who Rune was. He remembered the battle. He remembers going toe to toe with him, and he barely survived that. So right now he's like, oh, this guy's at his full power. The only instance that I have to take this guy out is with his back turned. And that's what happens. He is not going to go toe to toe with this guy. And he knows that. And he's smart enough to figure out this is the only way to win.
And if Rune had seen him, he'd be like, throw down your axe. He'd be like, shut the fuck up.
You're right.
I don't give a shit. What are you talking about? He's like, yes, I would have fallen for that when I was 23. I am 53 now in in a world where the average age of death is like 36. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of figured out a few things.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Jason Voorhees, and I swear to goodness, it's your cyber force. I get it.
I understand. Yeah, except it's good. No, I'm just kidding. I love Cyberforce, and Friday the 13th is usually objectively. So go on.
But yeah, I think it's a great Freddy versus Jason ending. Like, the hero walks away, and there lies Rune, and his eyes open, and it's like you can't. Yeah, these two are going to tussle at some point in the future. That's just going to happen at some point. Doesn't happen, but
think they are.
Yeah. Don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think they are. I think Conan will die of old age before Rune gets himself back together.
Oh, you think so?
In my head canon, like Rune never gets his revenge, as he wants it. He probably kills like Conan's like, great grandson or some shit, but it's in my mind, like Conan's like, let the dust cover this place. And by abandoning it means nobody's there for him to eat for a long, long time. And by the time he gets some sustenance, Conan has passed on, and possibly a couple of the statues made to him have started to erode. Like in my mind, Conan just wins the fight. He just wins it. Like they're never going to fight again.
I could write a story right now where somebody walks in there actually.
Right. It's all about headcanon, and in my headcanon, I'm like, this is the end of it. Yeah. It doesn't hurt my headcanon that it actually is the literal end of it as well.
Right.
Good point.
Derry, it's you, buddy. Tell me what you're thinking here.
I was surprised to see Chuck Dixon. I wasn't expecting to see his name on this thing. But yeah, it's a very Chuck Dixon story. A lot of clipped lines of dialogue that definitely sound like they came out of an 80s action film.
Yep.
A lot of big moments, a lot of great scenes, and yeah, I love the manipulation. Like we want Conan to fight Rune again, but we want him to have kind of a definitive end. So we're going to bring in again this almost Lovecraftian creature to make the stakes a little bit higher. So I did think that was great. I enjoyed this a lot. I was surprised that it was black and white. I wasn't expecting that. I have not read that many black and white comics, going to be completely honest with you. But it was nice. It felt very honest to the Conan mythology, because I know he's got a history with
And like this is Conan the Savage is, like I said, I think it's the spiritual successor to Savage Sword of Conan, which was also a black and white magazine.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying it feels like a Conan book. So
yeah, for sure.
I liked it. I thought it thematically it was a good follow up to everything else. Windsor Smith doesn't have anything to do with it, but you get a couple of great scenes where, Rune is in his full Ultraverse look with the wings spread out, the real like inhuman gaunt. Dean mentioned the Marilyn Manson pose, which I can't get out of my head now. It's all on full display here, so I really appreciate it. It was a good way to close it out. It really was.
I also think that I really like the way that the Lovecraftian guy looked. It looked like a nice spider thing, but if it was the guy from the Todd McFarlane video, what about a flame? But like I liked it. I liked the plot that like brought them there. Like I really, really liked that they weren't hunting Rune. That like Rune just happened to show up and Conan's like, God damn it, not today. like he's like, who the fuck is this prince? Like who's this? He's like, I know that guy. And I also really liked that the Lovecraftian monster guy, whose name I keep forgetting, what is it?
Baethra.
Yeah. I kept wanting to say Earth, and I'm like, that is not it. But Baethra was like, I know who you are, and then says Rune in like his language, which kind of sounds more like ruin.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I never thought about that with Rune, but maybe that's a play on word.
True.
And so I thought that was
in this case wide open, guys.
We had Unsolved Mysteries earlier, so Robert Stack's about to show up with like update, like really. I in some ways I actually like this better than the main event. Not because like the main event is objectively better. I think because it was shorter, the punch feels harder. I think that's really all it really is. And again, I'm just a mark for King Conan. I just really, I really like him just being like, yes, the man, blah, blah, blah. So in some ways I might like this just a smidge.
Right.
But I do think I think the main event is the Barry Windsor Smith one is objectively 100% better. Just like really, really good.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of scrolling down through here. I get to that page where he cuts his head off and then he just doesn't stop. He's just like, there goes the wings. There goes a leg. Now go your arms. I mean, it's great.
Well, and it's probably because like he figured out this guy somehow regenerated.
Right.
Well, if he's going to regenerate, I guess this will take longer.
It'll take a little while.
I'll be dead by that time.
Oh, man. Well, that was great, guys. We did it. Conan versus Rune. 3 books. A lot of fun. Let's go ahead and we will get into some plugs here. So, Dean Compton, tell us about the Unspoken Decade and what's going on over there.
We're doing the Unspoken Decade at Facebook. We're on Twitter. I've been a lot more active on Twitter lately. So you're welcome, everybody. Also, if this is still going on, Lynn Kaminsky is looking for some help right now. Been a really good friend of mine, and also the page was very complimentary of our Ghost Rider 2099 episode, which of course he co-created the character and wrote the book. So you see his GoFundMe. It is all the way funded now, but I think we're going to keep it up a little longer to help him out a little more. So give some money to that if you see it. Simby Fan is over at theunspokenDecade.com. He's going to do a 3-part thing on Parallax next. So like if you like your Hal Jordan's evil, motherfucker, do we have the thing for you? So that's where you can find us at Unspoken Decade on Twitter. Just search for us on Facebook and theunspokenDecade.com.
Very good. Yeah, folks, if you're listening to this podcast, you are listening to the Source Material Comics feed, most likely. We're on Spotify. We got polls over there. Yeah, if you're listening to the episode, take a look at the episode on your phone. There should be a poll question there, most likely. By golly, vote. Say something. Get back with us. Let us know what you're thinking there.
MTV rock the vote.
That's right, baby. Dean, Derry, and I, we have talked all sorts of comics, and as we're recording this, next Monday is going to be our discussion on Judge Dredd America. And yeah, that was a bit dour. But it was a good conversation nonetheless. And by the way, I still have to watch Dredd. I still have to watch that. I've been wanting to watch that with my son. And also you can check out me and Mark Radlich. Speaking of metal concerts, get your knives ready because me and Mark are we're talking a trilogy of metal comics. First one is Iron Maiden Legacy of the Beast, which is apparently based on a mobile game. And then After that, we're going to be talking Slayer Repentless, which is a very gory comic. And let me tell you, Slayer gets their shit in because there are lyrics that are part of the dialogue, and it's just ridiculous.
Nice.
And then our third comic will be Gwar Orgasmageddon, which was hilarious. It was. I didn't know much about Gwar, but then I started reading the comic, and then I found a documentary which was fantastic called "This Is Gwar." And if you get a chance, watch it. You'll learn so much about the band and how it started in comics. That's how that band started. So that's it. So we appreciate you listening. That's Dean Compton. That's Derry Wade. I am Jesse Starcher. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon. I'm hitting record.
All right.
And since I've got both you guys on here, we'll watch a little something just for a few.
Okay.
Galvatron, our jet's gonna crash into our tank!
No, it's not. They're going to transform into one robot.
Hell yeah.
Let's do some commercials. Let's do some
ones. They think they're
80s,
twice as tough as any
actually,
Autobot,
87?
and maybe they are.
Yeah.
87 transfer.
But they
Okay.
haven't met the Throttlebots yet.
Oh yeah.
Autobots.
The throttle bots, man. We're
The Transformers Duocons come together. Throttlebots sold
So
separately.
87, I am
Magnus,
9.
I've never seen Decepticons as
one of my
vicious
things
as
is
those
just like I
monstrous
can't remember
Paragons.
ever
Lucky we had
wondering
the
like
Technobots. Yeah,
would it have
but
been
I
cool
can't
to be
hear
that
only
kid
one horrific
who turns into Ultra Magnus, or would it have been
Would it have been very painful.
you know?
Out of monstrous Terracon beasts
Right.
comes the
Terracons
incredible
rule.
Abominus, the battle of fearless and futuristic Computrons.
The Technobots. Remember that part where Grimlock was super smart, and he's like, "No, you guys should be smart."
Look, the Stunticons.
There we go.
Oh yeah, Stunticon's my man.
Aerial bots have this kind of teamwork.
Stunticons attack.
You know, the thing is, the Stunticons are so cool. The dinosaurs are so cool. The toy, like when you combine them, sort of underwhelming.
Oh, I love Superion.
Everybody does, right? See, look, is that horrifying or great? I don't know.
Now collect over 50 Transformers decoys free and special.
Hell yeah!
Oh.
I remember G.I. Joe did the same thing with like some mini guys around the same time. Like you get this mini guy and the guy.
Trust me, Galvatron.
Hell yeah! You can't
Transformer
trust him,
double spy.
Galvatron.
From a supercar, he can transform into a heroic Autobot or an evil Decepticon.
He's literally the last person you should trust, Galvatron.
Decepticon
Right.
clones. Look,
I mean, honestly, there's only one person Galvatron can trust, and
to
that's
fight Autobot
Soundwave.
clones, one of these twins transforms into a jet, the other a dragster.
One of these guys right here, they're twins or something?
Clones sold together from Hasbro.
I didn't catch who that was.
They look like the exact same, except they transform different.
Autobots are monster bots.
They're monsters.
Monster bots!
I love the monster bots. I have Repugnus. He's adorable. There he is. I love that part. Like, good thing they're on our side. Like, Jesus Christ, fall down on Magnus. They don't look like Cybertron releases.
Oh, look at that shit. Sparks?
Yeah, they shot the sparks and stuff.
Nice.
The Transformers Monster Bot sold separately.
Yeah, I have Repugnus like right in front of me. Actually, he's one of my favorites.
Autobot attack.
6 shot will stop them. 6 shots at one robot.
Oh my God,
Oh,
6
six.
shot.
God.
This motherfucker brought 6 shot when I was in second grade, but he would let me play with him.
Oh! Motherfucker.
Later on, we'd be good friends. I never let him live it
There's
down.
never been a Transformer like him.
I was like, "Do you still have 6 shot?" He's like, "No." I was like, "Fuck."
Yeah.
Play with him now. We're in 10th grade.
I got 3. I figured out 5.
Six Shot, the most challenging.
Also, from what I understand, like insanely hard to transform that guy. Into
So difficult to transform.
No, Galvatron, we do have Target Master Transformers!
Okay.
All right, Target Masters. Not as big a fan as I am the Headmasters. For it.
That's right.
6 shot.
That's
Comes too.
There we go.
Oh, nice.
Target Master.
Very nice.
I didn't know we were showing off. I'll go get Repugnus.
Let's search that planet, Magnus. We've got to find them, but they're helping him defeat the Decepticons.
Oh,
It's the headmaster.
Repugnus.
Incredible.
Hell
Oh
yeah!
my
You-
goodness.
I never go anywhere without Repugnus at arm's length. I
Fuck, dude,
understand.
you always have like a toy box sitting by you when you do a podcast? Because
Yeah, pretty much.
It's been like more than a year, right, that we've been doing this shit.
Yeah.
Each headmaster
Wow.
displays a readout of its power. Nothing's better than going to battle with headmaster.
There you go.
Look at that shit, man. That is awesome.
And it is the secret base of the Headmaster Decepticon. Only with their help can we destroy the Autobots. Look! Yes, the trainer of the beast becomes the head of the robot.
Oh, so it like when you put the head in, it like
You can't transform it without the head.
Yeah.
okay.
The head, it transforms into like its own like little guy.
Yeah.
Same thing with like the Power Masters. I think work the same way.
Yeah, the Power Masters would plug into the engine.
Right. And like High Q's probably the best known of them because he was like Optimus Prime guy.
Yeah.
Who was Scorponok's guy? He was a big deal too. There we go. You're just sitting by 1987
It's like-
for some reason.
Yeah, like he's just got a big pile of them that he's sitting on. It's actually his chair. You thought it was a chair he was sitting in. It's just
Yeah, he
nothing
is
but
actually the
Transformers.
kid who turns into Ultraman.
Now, with
Oh, look at this. This is G1. This is Wheeljack.
Oh,
in the midst of
Wheeljack's
the
great.
Wars,
Wheeljack's
teams
phenomenal.
of Autobots and Decepticons blasted their way to planet Nebulon.
Nebulon!
Transformers let the intelligent Nebulons
Here we
become
go,
the heads
yeah.
of their robots. But the headmasters were still Autobots and Decepticons, and
I love how they
There's
feel like they need to
Scorponok.
tell a
That guy's
story.
Master Transformers and the equally incredible
Do what, Jesse?
They've got to tell a story. Oh shit! Now we're promoting comics. Sweet.
Well, the thing is like they did that for comic books because you could only have so much animation at the time for a commercial for a toy. But there are no laws about what you can do to promote a book, and those laws would be thornier because you have a First Amendment right to publish it.
I remember you mentioning that. Yeah,
So-
yeah,
And now,
Hell yeah. See, look at how this Scorponok's cool as hell, man.
yeah. No shit, man.
That's the
Oh,
only,
Scorponok's
you know,
the best.
one of my only complaints about like War for Cybertron is how they basically just turned Scorponok into like an attack dog.
Fortress Maximus.
He still looks cool as hell though.
Maximus.
I'm getting that next year. It's gonna cost $3,000. What the fuck?
Derry's gonna walk off the
Gary's pulling
screen.
out Fortress Maximus.
He's like
now.
Fortress Maximus.
I don't have Fortress Maximus. I have Metroplex, but he's just out of reach.
Ah,
I have Metroplex down in the
A
basement.
robot so
Like,
humongous, a separate robot becomes its head.
Its power's awesome.
From
Look at that
Hasbro.
I know. Dude,
I
that
pulled
thing is
these out
massive.
because my kid is obsessed with the new Transformers show on Paramount, so I wanted to show off a little bit.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's cool. Oh boy, this is.
can't be letting your kid like play with your old school stuff though, right?
Oh yeah, no. They can play with whatever they want. The only thing I haven't pulled out are my Power Master Optimus and my G2 Optimus. I think everything else is in play. I don't care.
You know, oh,
You're
wow.
a very nice person.
You are a very. Yes, you are. My goodness. Dean, when you got me that that Storm Shadow, right? I set it on my shelf, and if it was about 5 years earlier, it would have never seen the shelf because my kids would have had it, and then they would have opened that shit and pulled it out of there. And I'll tell you that I would have at that time probably flipped the lid. What are you showing off there? What was that, Derry?
Blur from the movie.
Yep,
the
from the movie.
super fast one.
guy. Oh, here's my man. This is the guy.
There he
right here.
is.
Fuck you, Dinobots. You're in trouble now. But yeah, he's like the only Decepticon you can trust, and he's also terrible.
Oh, we've already gone 6 minutes. I had not realized we went to a whole different video.
Oh yeah, we're on
Almost-
this 85 now.
Yeah, now we're back at 85. I was wondering why, like, the quality changed. All right, there we go. We broke the ice. That went by a lot quicker than I thought it would. I knew
Yeah,
if I
well,
had
you know.
if I had you guys on here, we could talk some Transformers. You guys could talk some
I
Transformers.
could talk Transformers all day, man. Like, honestly, if you keep it to like G1 and G2, I get a lot. Like, once after that, like, I don't know as much. Although I did watch a lot of Armada and Cybertron, because like it was on Cartoon Network when I worked there, and I worked 10 to 6. And so it would come on at 6 a.m. They would usually do a back-to-back one. Usually you get Armada and Cybertron back-to-back or whatever. But, like, I would watch it, but I didn't know what the fuck was going on. You know what I mean? I would recognize names and certain tropes, but, you know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there. I watched War for Cybertron. I really loved it. Highly recommended, you know, which Derry's like, gotta watch it. And he was right.
Yeah, that was the show they made by just using the same 3D models for the toys as the animation models, so they look exactly alike. It's everything you tell yourself you want when you're watching Generation 1. I loved it. It was total fan service. The originals meet the Beast characters, and everyone's in it for at least one scene. But the new one's good too. It's just a little bit more skewed young.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, War for Cybertron, like, it's serious and like people. I don't know. So, you know, I mean,
War for Cybertron was made for us. War for Cybertron was like, hey, you remember these things from your youth? Well, guess what? They're getting a grim, dark, adolescent upgrade, and I loved every second of it.
The best part is when, like, they're going to meet Sound Blaster to, like, try and make a deal, and RC's talking to Bumblebee, and she's like, isn't he, like, an imperfect clone of Soundwave? And Bumblebee's like, yeah, and he really hates it when you mention that, so try not to bring it up.